Support for Louisiana, the state we're in, is provided by...
Every day, I go to work for Entergy.
I know customers are counting on me.
So Entergy is investing millions of dollars
to keep the lights on
and installing new technology
to prevent outages before they happen.
Together,
we power life.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
We have a lot of our outdoor ventures that are open and have been open for a while now.
From the River Parishes, the recovery of tourism.
He was like, I didn't speak to you about Hurricane Katrina because no one ever spoke to me about Hurricane Betsy.
17 years post-Katrina. What did we miss?
And I think there's a lot of different opportunities for incorporating positive behavior systems with attendance and using that as a way to break through to some of our families that don't have that feeling of connection right now.
And yet another struggle for educators.
I look at it as a learning experience for all of us.
A preview of the all-new LSU.
After months of a relatively quiet hurricane season, disturbances are slowly brewing. The National Weather Service is tracking at least 3 in the Atlantic.
Yeah, Danielle became the first hurricane of the season, could reach winds of 100 miles an hour, but as it speeds northeast into the colder Atlantic, it's expected to die out and won't affect land.
Now, the other 2 tropical waves are not expected to develop much. One is just off Africa, the other in the Caribbean. Again, neither considered a threat at this time.
However, hurricane season doesn't end until the end of November. That's officially, so we remain in prime season right now. Experts urging everyone to make sure they have a game plan. Well, on this date a year ago, stunned Louisianans were just beginning to assess damage from Hurricane Ida, which had swept in just days before. Some of the numbers leading to recovery: 564,544. That's the number of applications approved, with $1.2 billion going to survivors. $1.3 billion, that's in disaster loan money for 26,000 approved businesses. 14,540 national flood insurance claims paying $655 million, and 22,911 the number of Louisianans counseled to make their homes safer and stronger. We talked with a tourism leader about that recovery. Recovery a year after Ida now, and in the River Parishes, which is the heart of swamp country, they got hit very, very hard. And Jay Robichaux, who is the executive director for tourism for the River Parishes, all of them, is in LaPlace right now to give us an update. Hi, Jay.
Hi, Andre. How are you doing today, buddy?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm good. We're hanging in there. We're resilient people here in the River Parishes. We keep moving forward. You know, every day is a new day here in the River Parishes.
Well, what is this situation where if tourists want to go and have the swamp experience, which is so popular, is that up and running full speed? What do they need to know or contact? Is that your office?
We have a lot of our outdoor ventures that are open and have been open for a while now. You know, we have great fishing here. We have the best catfish in the country here in the River Parishes. We have redfish in the River Parishes. You catch crawfish, you catch crabs, everything you can put inside of a gumbo, you can catch here in the River Parishes. We also have biking trails. We have a mountain biking trail. We also have the Mississippi River Levee Trail that goes from New Orleans almost to Baton Rouge, which is 50 miles long, which gets utilized every day.
Yeah.
We have kayaking in and around the river parishes and all of our swamps. In the Bonnie Carrier Spillway, we have kayaking. We have people who fish off the kayaks in the spillway every day. We also have our swamp tours that have been up and running, where you get in the pontoon boat or the airboat, and you actually get up and close with alligators and learn about them. And now our newest exhibit, our newest thing to do in the River Parishes is a zip line. It's the world's first fully aquatic zip line.
Wow.
You start over water, you end over water. While you're zip lining and you're gliding over the swamp, you get to see the alligators, you get to see the cypress trees, and it's a very cool experience. Wow. It really is.
And you're above them and out of their reach of their mouths, I guess. No, it looks like a blast. You know, I'm curious, so when you think of swamp and areas like that, you almost wonder, well, you know, they can withstand, it's water and marsh, so they can withstand wind, but what was the major problem? Is it infrastructure there or getting to those places that you've had to contend with?
It was mostly getting to the places.
Okay.
We had lots of trees down. You know, it pretty much cleared out a lot of the older trees that have been just basically hanging out.
Sure.
It was a long experience just cleaning up more than anything for our outdoor adventures.
But for you, it's open now, things are happening, and recovery continues very well for the River Parishes, and we're delighted to hear it. And it's fun to see that zip line. Jay, it's great to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
It's been 17 years since Hurricane Katrina, but the devastation still lingers in many hearts and minds. Some of New Orleans' most vulnerable populations are still picking up the pieces after all these years. In his newly released documentary, Katrina Babies, Edward Buckles, a filmmaker from New Orleans, gives voice to the generation that were just children during this dark moment in history. And tonight, we'll hear from Buckles on just how traumatic the storm was for those children.
No one could have predicted the devastation and pain caused by Hurricane Katrina. 17 years later, and it's still considered one of the worst storms on record.
They have a lot of people inside of the attics. They're screaming. We can hear them, and we're trying to get them out right now.
We've already evacuated 2 busloads of individuals. We really don't want to take people out by gunpoint.
I don't know where nobody is.
But after all the candle vigils and anniversary specials, one story was buried underneath the headlines. The kids' stories. How are they doing after experiencing something so painful? Edward Buckles, the filmmaker behind Katrina Babies, says the question is simple, but no one ever asked.
I was tired of seeing the same specials come out, and then, you know, eventually as the years went by, they started using, you know, phrases like New Orleans is rebuilt, New Orleans is coming back. And I thought that was interesting, specifically because no one had ever checked on the kids, you know. How can New Orleans be back? And how can, you know, we keep just telling the same narrative, but never including the people who were the youngest during the storms?
Buckles explores the concepts of innocence, mental health, and how both seem to clash after a traumatic event in his documentary Katrina Babies. He draws from personal experience to highlight how his life was dramatically different after his childhood was basically washed away.
When did you realize that the storm was actually affecting you mentally? How old were you?
I think that if you were to ask the question, when did I start to, explore, you know, the possibility of having trauma, it was in 2015 when I first started teaching high school, and when I first realized that my students, who literally I sat in their same seats, because I taught at the high school that I graduated from, and once I began to see just how similar we were, and like how some of the things that they were battling, like anxiety and fight or flight and trust issues. And I was like, wait a minute, I dealt with that when I was younger, but it wasn't until I was in this edit.
That's when he realized he couldn't have been the only Katrina kid without an outlet to talk about what happened.
So what about the people that you found? They were great interviews, and a lot of them kept mentioning, I've never talked about this. I've never brought this up. Did they realize that they had trauma from the storm later on, or was it something that had been sticking with them?
It varies, because when I first started this project, I didn't know that that was a common theme. I didn't know that most of my peers and most of the children of Katrina had never spoken about it before. I was just trying to draw parallels between what happened in 2005 and, what was happening in New Orleans with the youth, right? But I didn't expect that, them sitting down, speaking with me for the interview would be their first time. It wasn't until I spoke with Maisha Williams, who actually says that in the film for the first time. And when she broke down and, started crying during our interview, it honestly caught me off guard. And, I asked her, I was like, hey, so why are you crying right now? And I asked her, have you ever spoken about this? And she said, no. And then I said, why? And she said, because no one ever asked me. So that was a moment that really sat me down, but it also validated this journey that I was on.
It's estimated that the storm cost about $125 million in damages. The relief efforts dominated headlines for weeks. In Buckles' documentary, he stresses that adults were so consumed by the rebuilding, while his peers were falling apart. But he doesn't want this documentary to point fingers.
I also want to encourage the adults and the elders that they have to give themselves grace, because specifically Black and Black adults and elders, they have to give themselves grace, because something that my father told me after he watched the film was, he apologized and he said, man, I'm sorry that I never spoke with you, but he was like, I didn't speak to you about Hurricane Katrina because no one ever spoke to me about Hurricane Betsy. So I just want the elders and the adults and your parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles of our communities to not be hard on themselves.
But ultimately, Buckles wants everyone to realize that trauma can be overlooked, no matter how publicized the issue.
You can watch Katrina Babies on HBO. Educators nationwide are facing what feels like obstacle after obstacle. Since the pandemic, we've watched teacher shortages, students struggling with grades, and an alarming climb in truancy rates. Louisiana's truancy rate totaled 40% during the 2020-2021 school year. But Joe Waddy, manager of mental health services of KIPP Schools, New Orleans, says that this issue is years in the making. People have been talking a lot about the truancy rate in Louisiana, but first, can you define what that even means?
Yeah, so a student or family is considered truant in Louisiana when they've missed 5 consecutive days of school within a semester, and for those school absences, not being able to produce medical documentation or any other kind of documentation that would allow that absence to be considered an excused absence. And so a lot of times we have students or families that might miss multiple days throughout the year, but for the definition of truancy, they're looking for students that are consistently absent from school.
What happens to these students if they're consistently absent?
A lot of different things can happen. The way that the system in Louisiana is set up is that the school has an obligation to do, a general outreach to the family every day that the student is absent unexcused. Those expectations from the school increase each time you hit a different threshold. So for example, at the 3-day unexcused point, schools are obligated to send a formalized letter to families. And then if they get to that 5-day point at any time, then the school is obligated to reach out and schedule an in-person meeting to discuss the situation. But then ultimately the system is designed to have the family referred to either truancy court or to a program called FINS to hopefully get some generalized support in place for the family. But the structure and system, the way it's designed, does kind of eventually lead to that ultimate truancy summons consequence for the family.
So this is definitely a serious issue. Schools take this very seriously.
Yeah, it's a really serious issue, and I think it's one that, you know, I don't know if it can be taken seriously enough. I think a lot of times we don't take seriously enough the individualized support that those families and students that are in those situations will actually require. And so, you know, while the system is designed to be a little bit automated and give us consistency of when we're expected to reach out to families, I do think that there is a gap in the individualized support that can be designed and delivered.
Has our truancy rate seen an increase lately?
Yeah, the pandemic and also, you know, the Hurricane Ida of last year greatly impacted our, you know, not just our numbers of families or students that can be considered truant, but then also the amount of days in totality missed for truant students, that also increased. You know, and it's something that New Orleans and Louisiana was struggling with before the pandemic and before Hurricane Ida. And so I think one of the real challenges is that, you know, we are seeing an increase in the amount of students that are disconnected, but we're also seeing an increase in the amount of support and also the complexity of the support that's needed to re-engage that family or student or reconnect them with one of our schools.
But you said this was an issue before the pandemic and before all these hurricanes.
Absolutely.
Why?
I think that there, you know, if you don't have a reason to feel connected, loved, and supported to your school, that's a huge barrier. And I think, you know, especially understanding that, you know, we support and we school families from every type of economic background that exists, and, you know, our community here faces a lot of, you know, daily events that can be traumatic and that can cause other barriers to being able to get to your school on time or feel comfortable being there each day. And so I think that there is a unique need for individualized support and individualized planning.
I mean, besides housing and, you know, the pandemic, are there any other reasons why these kids are missing school? Is it a mental health problem?
There's so many things. I think the unique challenge that truancy presents is oftentimes the act of being truant isn't the real issue that's there. And so for so many students and families, identifying them through their consistent time missing school, a lot of times that is the opportunity for our school-based social workers or counselors to start to dive in and find out what those reasons are, because, you know, there are so many different ones that, yeah, for some students it is mental health. For other students it's simply access to basic needs. For some of our students that are EL or English learning students, a lot of times, do we have everything translated for the family? Has registration information been made available in their native language? Have they received communication from someone in their native language? There are so many different factors that can come up, and so I think, like I said, it's the simple fact that this helps us identify that there might be a lot more there that's needed than just a reminder to come to school.
So I'm guessing there's not just one type of solution in a situation like this.
No, there isn't. But I definitely think that there are some consistent guidelines that folks can follow. And you know, I think one of the biggest things that we talk about at our schools and that we talk about with our social workers and counselors is, you know, how do we celebrate and reward all forms of positive attendance. I think schools are really used to those programs where perfect attendance, you get this pizza party and this, but, you know, are we looking at ways to celebrate and support students where this might be the first week of the year where they made it to school on time every day, or this might have been the family's, you know, first opportunity to commit to getting the student safely to the bus stop every day. And I think there's a lot of different opportunities for incorporating positive behavior systems with attendance and using that as a way to break through to some of our families that don't have that feeling of connection right now. Let's say I had to move because of the pandemic, or I was displaced because of Hurricane Ida. You know, what is it that makes me feel connected to this school? Has there been outreach of that kind? And so, you know, I just think making sure that we see the data for the concern that it is in general, but also seeing that extra layer of there are going to be groups and individuals within this list that we have to wrap our arms around a little bit more.
All right, so basically meeting kids where they are.
Meeting kids and families where they are, absolutely.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
A Sunday night in the Superdome, LSU returns to the scene where the Tigers were crowned national champions of 2019. That blowout win over Clemson capped a perfect, dominating season. What we've seen since has been nothing like it. After cleaning house, we finally get to see a new coach, new staff, and many new players. There's excitement and anxiety. So I called on 3 calm Tiger experts to talk 2022 and Game 1 of the Brian Kelly era. 3 guys who know LSU football as well as anybody, I would say. Doug Morrow, former All-American, my brother, and longtime LSU Radio Network broadcaster. Ron Higgins, longtime reporter of the Tigers from many different publications. And Jeremy Hill, former LSU running back, now on 104.5 Guaranteed Network, ESPN. So great to have you here. And it's been a weird ride the past few years of LSU football. That's an understatement. But now we're on a different ride altogether with a new coach, new atmosphere. And Doug, I'll just start with you. What is your glimpse into what we might see this year?
My glimpse is that it's too early to tell anything about this team because this team is a totally different team than won the national championship, as you know, but a totally different team than last year, too. One coach coming back from last year's coaching staff. Everybody else is new. Many, many different players. A lot of the players that were here last year are much different players than they were last year. And the way things are expected of them, it appears, are much different than the coaches in years past expected of them. So look, I look at it as a learning experience for all of us, okay, for the fans, for the players, for everybody else. I think it's going to be exciting to watch it.
Ron, what's your take?
You've got 13 transfers, and Brian Kelly did that because they had 39 scholarship athletes who had to get immediate help. In this world of transfer portal where guys can transfer at halftime of games if they feel like it, as long as the NIL money's good. 5 of your 6 top cornerbacks in this team are transfers. 2 of your starting linemen, offensive line, are transfers. There is a definite learning, get to know you process of chemistry going on, and I think Brian Kelly hasn't been bashful about telling the truth in preseason. Like, most places I've gone to, I've coached at, I've been able to pencil in starters. He goes, there's not much penciling, and I think that's what fans need to understand about this team early, that they're still trying to find their way chemistry-wise, and really almost an entire new offensive line of starters.
What about you, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think for me, being an LSU fan since a kid, and Nick Saban taking over, you kind of saw a precipice take over Baton Rouge, and that's dominant football. And to play in 4 national championships in the past 22 years, not many programs can state that. So I think for LSU, and a lot of the fans, I believe, have been spoiled with winning, and these last 2 years have been a wake-up call for a lot of people. And so for this program, I think right now is the peak of sunshine and rainbow, like we say on Hunting Hill, sunshine and rainbow season. So everyone, hey, we're winning it all.
This before the kickoff,
great.
Right?
Yeah, everything's great. We got a new coach. Everything's great. But I think, like they said, this team has so much work to do. So many starters, so many positions not solidified. Don't even know who your quarterback's going to be. They got their work cut out for them. But even saying that, I think there's still a ceiling there for this team. If things go the right way, they can possibly win 8 or 9 games, possibly more if things go the right way for them.
All right, so quarterback has been the big topic off season and has really been the topic in the past couple of weeks now, with Miles Brennan leaving, and that leaving the job up to a transfer, and a guy who's been here but hasn't played that much, and then a true freshman. Ron, I'll go with you first. Your take on that?
You've got guys still trying to feel their way. You got a guy who was at Jaden Daniels, who was at Arizona State for 3 years, who put up nice numbers, but a really, really erratic passer. And he's been working on his footwork all summer, and 3 years into it, if you're still working on your footwork, you kind of wonder a little bit. But the guy is unbelievably fast, and there may be times where he probably should throw it, but he's going to tuck it because he's so fast. They timed him, I think, in the spring one day at 21 miles per hour running. He's very fast. Garrett Nussmeier has learned to be less gunslinger and more game manager, and understand you take shots downfield when you have them, not necessarily when you feel like throwing them. So that's up in there. That's very much up in the air, and that's the leader of your offense. And I think LSU fans have to get used to the fact this is a team in development, and it's going to be developing all year. But it needs some acceleration the first 5 games of the year to get to the second half of the year.
Not a team, though, without talent. But not ranked high at all. I mean, not ranked at all, really, but not really forecast to be great, which could work really well in their favor, Doug.
I think they've got a lot of talent, and I don't think anybody doubts that, particularly the coaches. It's a matter of getting the talent to all play together, to work together. But you know, the one thing I think that is unique, or will be unique, I anticipate, of this team is that normally LSU has not had a head coach who is a quarterback guy. In other words, this coach likes to be with the quarterbacks, likes to talk about them, likes to teach them, has a real feel for them. And that's something unique in LSU anyway.
It is.
For coaches, head coaches, to be people that work very much with the quarterbacks and are kind of the last answer. Coach, what should I do? It's the head coach that makes the decision. And that's going to be a unique situation, I think, for LSU football.
All right, so it starts off with Florida State. I'm going to put you all quickly on the spot. Give me a record prediction. Jeremy, let's start with you for this year.
That's a tough one. I wish I knew who the quarterback was before I made this prediction, but since you're putting me on the spot, I'll go 8-4 for this season. I think they're gonna lose some SEC games that they probably shouldn't lose, but I think they're gonna clip somebody. We saw them play Alabama tight last year, and I think a lot of these guys, in that game they're not even playing on this team right now. They got a lot more talented guys now, so I'll go 8-4 for this season.
Okay, Ron.
I agree, 8-4. 9-3 if they get a break somewhere along the way. 8-4 and staying healthy.
Okay.
But yeah, 8-4. I think it's a pretty solid pick.
Doug.
9-3 going on 10-2.
All right. Good optimism. Thank you so much for being here. It's a blast to have all three of you guys here to talk a little preseason LSU football before we kick off the 2022 season.
Thank you, brother. Good being with you.
Thank you. And LSU Florida State kicks off 6:30 Sunday night on ABC. And everyone, that's our show for this week. Remember, you can watch anything LPB anytime, wherever you are, with our LPB PBS app.
You can catch LPB news and public affairs shows, as well as other Louisiana programs you've come to enjoy over the years. And please like us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram.
For everyone here at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Morrow.
And I'm Kara St. Cyr.
Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Support for Louisiana, the state we're in, is provided by...
Every day, I go to work for Entergy.
I know customers are counting on me. So Entergy is investing millions of dollars to keep the lights on and installing new technology
to prevent outages before they happen.
Together.
We power life.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.